All right, we will now call a special meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can you take roll?
Councilmember Brand. Councilmember Brandow. Brandow. I'm sorry. Councilmember Capriolio. Councilmember Olivier. Councilmember Quintero. Councilmember Soria. Council President Baines.
Here. All right, we'll now stand and we will pledge the flag. Face the flag. Ready, salute. Right now, the council has two items on its agenda today. We have a closed session item, and then we have a resolution ratifying a local emergency. At this time, the council is going to immediately adjourn to closed session, and we will come out and deal with the resolution after closed session. Come back to session from our closed session. I think we have 4 council members in the room, so we'll call the meeting back to order. First off, City Attorney, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
No.
Okay. Now we're going to move right into our number two item, which is two resolutions. Resolution proclaiming and ratifying a local emergency as a result of the inoperable and dangerous gas line at 2103 North Angus Street, and a resolution declaring an urgent necessity for the preservation of life, health, property, and authorizing the city manager to contract for the repair of natural gas line 2103 North Angus Street, Fresno, California. So with that, I'm going to allow staff to make some comments, and then we'll go right into council comments. Bruce, did you want to open up? Did you want to put any context to the resolutions at all, or?
As I shared with you in an email on Wednesday, the situation out at Somerset Apartments has evolved over the course of the last week. I was notified late Friday evening from Dale Estabrook as well as the mayor, and then subsequently with Councilmember Olivier. What we thought was just a situation in which there was some minor repairs being made to gas lines at 6 to 7 units at the Somerset apartment complex, quickly evolved into a situation that was far broader, far greater than that. My understanding is the underlying infrastructure or gas main, for a lack of a better term, this is not a PG&E gas main, but actually the gas line or lines that serve the various units out at Somerset apparently had been leaking for a while, as well as some of the lines that connect to each unit. And PG&E, as a result of safety concerns, had terminated gas service around November 12th. Over the course of last week, with the help of Councilmember Olivier, as well as the firm and others, we were able to make at least some interim steps and buy us some time to assess the situation. Based on a number of tests, we found that not only was there the underground infrastructure had failed or was leaking, that there were 41 separate apartments that had gas lines within the walls that were also leaking. So this is not something that just happened overnight. It's been a situation that has occurred over quite some time. As a result, we essentially dealt with this as we would with any natural disaster. An incident command was set up Tuesday evening, made up of Fresno Fire Department, Code Enforcement, County Health and Public Health Department, Firm, Red Cross, a number of the Housing Authority, a number of stakeholders. What we are facing now, and my estimates were given to me based on Fresno Heating Plumbing, who was part of the team at the time, is that the underlying work needed to provide gas or get gas restored to the apartment complex could take 2 to 3 weeks. We also have, once gas is restored, including repairs to the 41 separate units, then there's also concerns that once gas is restored, whether or not we're going to find failed heaters or stoves. We're not sure how many people we're dealing with. It could be anywhere up to 1,500. The counts vary as the number of individuals. It is primarily to a great extent, Southeast Asian community, very tight knit. The mayor and I had a brief discussion with the property owner on Wednesday of last week, who has committed to both the mayor and I that he will address not only this immediate issue as well as a very, very lengthy list of code violations that we identified during the initial assessment. We have inspected, I think, 60 to 70% of all the units, and so staff is preparing that list. I am scheduled to meet with the owner later this evening, and I will go over that list with him as well. He has provided, and his attorney has provided us a copy of a contract with Nelson Construction, who's supposed to begin work tomorrow. But in the event the work does not proceed, either with the underlying repair of the underlying gas lines and or the apartments or the code violations, we need this resolution to potentially we rely on this resolution in order to pursue other resources that may become available to us to mitigate our costs. We are incurring costs, or through our partners with the American Red Cross, incurring costs for a mobile kitchen. We're providing meals twice a day, one for lunch, one for dinner. We also have been able to acquire large mobile showering facilities to mitigate the loss or lack of hot water. Granville Homes has made a donation of 300 blankets, electric blankets, because we also now have a issue in which donations were made for portable heating units, but that is overloading the electrical system, and there's concern for the well-being of the residents as a result of problems that could occur as a result of circuit breakers or wiring systems failing. We are cautiously optimistic, but again, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and this resolution is needed in order for us to ensure that in the event that the landlord fails to keep his promise to this community, that the city will step in and address this issue, at least the immediate issue, as well as some of the long-term issues, and take every step, all of the steps available to us in order to remedy this problem.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Bruce. I know you and your staff have been working around the clock on the issue. Now I'm going to take the item out to the public, and as a matter of just courtesy, I see my good friend and former colleague, Councilmember Blanc-Jean, back there. Councilmember Jean, would you like to make any remarks on this issue? I know that you've been involved.
Morning, Council Member, Council President, City Attorney over there, and Mayor, City Manager. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this particular issue. I'm going to try to get to the point as quickly as I can, understanding the time limit. I'm here to support the resolution that Council, that I hope that you move forward to. And it's not a resolution necessarily to stop the partnership, but to encourage the partnership to address the issue that affects a large community that's here within the city limits. But I also want to make sure that I had a chance to be at the location as well a couple of times, and I want to support the organizations that are doing a tremendous amount of work, especially the CBOs, firm and their partners with Red Cross. They're doing an incredible job with the limited resources that is made available. That ties into the funding, and I would encourage that we also pay close attention to the fundings that are being given or distributed, that they reach the organizations that are actually doing the job. And I understand that there's administrative costs and the things that goes to it, but I hope that we look at the funding because it's the critical need and use of the community that matters. And I hope that the organizations that are actually at the ground floor are receiving those as quickly as possible. And then this ties into the city, and the next request is that I hope that the city look at some of the Southeast Asian staff that they have here that speaks Hmong, Lao, Cambodian, and other languages, that they partner and provide some of those assistance. As you know, there's, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or how long this goes, they need resources to provide with some of those organizations that are currently doing those. And they're getting partnership from the CBOs, but they're also stretched thin in terms of their funding and how they move their staff around. So I hope the city look at some opportunities there. And then my last request is that I had a chance to talk with some of the CBOs, and this goes into communicating to the group. I think it's unfair for the organizations that are serving the residents to make any type of official statements or saying that, you know, this is when it's going to get done, this is where they think it's going to get done, those things puts them in a very tough and difficult situation. The question is always asked, so, well, how is this going to be resolved, who's doing what and where? And when you have CBOs that speak on that behalf, especially when the issue is the city and county issue, or from that perspective, then the burden falls to the CBOs. And the community there will think that the CBOs are the ones that are leading the charge, and technically on this side, they're not. And at some point, when the city feels comfortable, they have to make an official statement to the folks and to the community, going through some of those ethnic medias, and say, this is what we think, this is the expectation, this is where it ends, and allow the CBOs to do the work that they need to do. And lastly, I would encourage us to reach out, because this is, as I've had an opportunity to sit up there, this is really also not just a city issue. That's also our county partners as well, and where they are involved in serving the constituent groups, because the majority of them are receiving some type of aids. And so I hope that they're involved, and then the Housing Authority weigh in heavily, a little bit more engaged in terms of this. Thank you very much. Appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have a card from Bill Leifer. I'm sorry. Thank you. Come on down, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is William Leifer. I'm an attorney. I'm also an assistant of the city of Fresno. Before I start, Madam Mayor, President, members of the council, I'm here because I was asked by the owner of Somerset Village to come and speak with you and try to work things out. As City Manager Rudd correctly described, this is something that's kind of blown out over the last week and a half. Certainly, the gas was turned off about 2.5 weeks ago, but initially it was trying to find something that seemed innocuous, and it's kind of blown out of proportion. Not necessarily that it misstates the condition, but from the owner's standpoint, this is kind of like surprised everybody about the immensity of the problem. But that being said, the owner did have contractors out. I went there, I got engaged on Tuesday to come out. I went right to the property. I've been there before, and there were all sorts of trucks from Fresno Plumbing, and I understand that they were concerned. You saw the emails, so they're not there. But my client does have a contractor, general contractor. He's out there now. He has permits to do the work. He's getting work done. May I suggest that in this case there are problems, but they're not necessarily the landlord's problems as much as a city problem. And I just want to make sure that while we have concern for the people who are there, from a rental owner and a representative from the rental industry, this is a real problem, that we have a community. I've been out to the community, and I've been there for years. It's a wonderful place. But I hope we don't lose sight of the difference between something that's a community issue rather than a legal obligation or burden for the landlord. The landlord is doing something about this. He's out there now. They were out there before. They will be out there doing things to get these things taken care of. I'm not clear that the resolution is needed at this time, but I do assure you that I got an email that the contractor's out. They're doing the work. They got the permit for the piping and so forth, the gas, and so I think that this matter will get resolved. I think we need to have a perspective between a community issue versus a landlord issue, and simply piling it on the landlord may not get what we're trying to do, and that is resolve these issues. Thank you. Any questions?
We'll call you back up if there are questions.
I'm sorry?
We'll call you back up if there are
Thank you.
questions.
Okay.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to comment on this item?
No problem. Good morning. I'm Zach Dara, the Executive Director of Fresno Interdenominational Refugee Ministries. So I want to thank you guys, the City Council, Council President, Mayor Ashley being here. First, I have to just thank you overall in the City of Fresno for just taking this issue very seriously, mobilizing into action in a time that's challenging with the holiday weekend and things like that. Councilman Olivier has been on site with us pretty much every single day from the first day, and I've also been incredibly appreciative of Mayor Ashley and Bruce being on site and being in front of the community, which is incredibly, I heard many residents who were so happy to see you there, and that was a very big deal for the members of the community, so thank you. And I'm here mostly today to speak to the residents. I'd have to disagree with a lot of the comments that were made previously to me coming up here. This is not a gas line issue for firm. This is not a landlord issue or city issue or lawyer issue or liability issue. What firm is involved in is what is best for the residents, and that's my issue. That's firm's business. And if I could just encourage the council and all parties that are involved, including Mayor Ashley and Bruce, we really need to think about what is best for the residents, and that's what we do. Firm will be here every step of the way for the residents. We're here as an asset, an ally, teammate in the community. We're also, getting other CBOs together. I just got off the phone with Lou Yang this morning, who's the executive director of the Fresno Center for New Americans, and he will also be providing resources and support in this effort. And they serve the refugee community just as Firm does. But I really want to just urge and kind of echo a lot of the things that Blong Zhang has shared this morning. Many of those concerns are the same for mine. We're spending probably in the couple of $1,000s a day at this point. I'm not familiar with everyone's background in a seat up there, but in the CBO world, a couple $1,000s a day is a significant expense for us. And the reality of Firm's situation is we do not have a reserve fund or an endowment or anything like that. We do our best to pay the bills every month and every nickel and penny to go to the residents. That's what we do at Firm. Anything that the council could do to ensure that resources are allocated in a way that could go directly to not only to Firm but to the CBOs who are doing the work on the ground, would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, and I know my time is up, but lastly, my concern at this point really is what is the real timeline? And I think that's the question that we all need to talk about. I heard in the meetings, as many of you who were there did, we're looking at 3 weeks as a best case scenario. You guys, I'm sure, in your positions have been part of projects working on infrastructure, et cetera. Best case scenarios are not what usually occur.
Zach, your time's up, actually.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
No problem. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this issue?
Good morning, Mayor Swearingen. Oh, there she is. Council members and city staff. My name is Gary Jensen, and I'm the pastor of the Fresno Central Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are right over by the Fresno Art Museum. I've met Councilman Olivier before about a problem that we had at the radio park. Our property is right in front of the apartments in question, and we just found out about this problem just a few days ago. The reason I'm here is to mention a couple of resources that we're trying to make available. I have a couple of people with me this morning, our Community Services Director, Elaine Wood, and we have a brochure that we'd like to leave with the council members about our work. We also have Pastor Justin Kim from All Nations Seventh-day Adventist Church over in River Park, and one of his members, Ku Zhang. We are in the process of, and we also have an Asian church in town. We're in the process of getting translators, especially Hmong translators and Laotian translators. That's one of the things we're working on that will work with Firm to provide people that are there on site, both for the cookhouse and also for the residents. We also have an organic farm at Fresno Adventist Academy between Peach and Clovis on Olive Avenue. We are trying to make arrangements with the farm to get some produce, both fruits and vegetables, to make available. But as the director of FIRM had just mentioned, as a nonprofit organization, which primarily helps to fund the school, we could use some help. We have food, local food, that the organic food that we can provide, but funding would be helpful. But our main thing right now is trying to get translators that can assist the people that are working there in these mobile units. So we'd be happy to help out any way we can. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to speak on this issue? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais. Councilmember Olivier.
Thank you. And Pastor, there's Zach, are you already in touch with the pastor? Okay, great. So that connection's been made, and thank you for coming forward and offering some of your services. Zach, do you want to wrap up your remarks? You can do that on my time.
Thank you, Councilman Olivier. So kind of where I picked up off was just really looking at what the actual timeline looks like. If it's 3 weeks just to fix the main, and then we're looking at another 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, not. We're also, of course, experiencing, some rain, actually, thank the Lord. But, does rain set back this timeline at all? This isn't my area of expertise, but we need to be clear, I think, as a city, as us working on this issue, on what is the timeline. The contractors who do this every day, we're very adamant, best case scenario, 3 weeks. And so my concern then is that as we look at the residents, sheltering in place, and I'm also, again, not an expert in this, for months at a time, I don't know if that's a normal thing. I don't know also if we have the capacity as a community to continue to flow 50 volunteers a day to feed these folks. And people have been great, but the bottom line, those of you who have worked with volunteers, and I know each and every one of you have, at some point, you start hearing the same thing over and over. We're not going to get 50 volunteers a day to come, and it's going to be me and Clint and Bruce cooking fish. And, and as much as we would do that, I think we've got a lot of things to do outside of cooking fish. And so I think we need to look at what that detailed timeline is, have a firm look at what the process is for communicating that timeline to the residents, and then look at, okay, if we're looking at farther down the line into Christmas or after, is sheltering in place the best strategy or scenario for the residents? And so, and I would appreciate you guys, as I know you guys have other forces in play than I do, but, that would be, really my request at this time. I appreciate, again, I can't say it enough, you have a lifelong friend in FIRM and Zach Dara, and anything we can do, because your response has been wonderful, and really, I hope the community has seen the same thing that I have. And so thank you for the work you've already done, and I know we'll continue to do for the next few weeks. So do you have any questions?
I have one question for you, and I didn't plan on asking you when you came up to finish your remarks, but obviously the condition of the residents is of utmost concern to this body and this organization as a whole. How, and I don't want to put you on the spot, are you beginning to be approached by folks who are wishing to relocate or be evacuated?
Absolutely, yes.
You are?
I saw moving trucks there on Saturday, and so people are kind of making their way out. I also had at least one family contact me directly to find out the process for them to leave, and that's the challenge, in some of these things I don't have a good answer, and all I said is that I will speak to those who know the answer to this question and do my best to get back to you, because as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're not a Section 8 property or perhaps CalWorks eligible, the resources for you to move out are essentially like anybody else. You can move out if you like, you just got to move out. I don't know if there are resources available for folks to leave. I don't know. This is information I do not have. But I think some of the people would like that information at this time. If there are resources or a process by which, if they're saying, I would like to relocate and move, how does that process look? And that also connects with the question we've been getting more than anything else about rents. What people really don't know, they don't want to do the wrong thing. And I think that's what's at hand now. Am I not supposed to write my check? Am I? Is the lawyer supposed to tell me? So these are some of those detailed questions. And it kind of connects with that. If they leave, do they have to, pay off their rent essentially that they owe for whatever days or
Well, it definitely sounds to me like something that, obviously I know I can speak for my colleagues when I say that we're all concerned about that, and it sounds to me like more outreach is needed here. So that's something that maybe we can get with Long. And I've also been contacted by folks from Long Television who are interested in doing a meeting of their own and address some of these concerns in terms of if they choose to move, or if they wish to be taken out of that situation, and if they have to pay rent. This is definitely, I think, outreach is needed here, and I think that's something we should probably try and tackle here as a community this week, and probably the earlier the better.
I'd like to also just try to do my best to give you the most accurate number that I can. As we've done door-to-door outreach, I think we have seen a good amount of units that are no longer occupied just because folks have gone to stay with family. We are now estimating approximately 500 people are still on site.
Wow.
On site. Not, probably not 1,000. We're not seeing that as we go door to door. So people have started to leave and to stay with others. Now, that doesn't mean that the capacity of is not 1,200 or 1,500, or we're saying that's probably all true and good, but people right away have said, well, I'm not going to be here if we're not going to have gas, and I'm going to go find somewhere to stay with friends or family, which we think has occurred. And so as we're feeding people and as we're doing door-to-door outreach with various information, electric blankets, et cetera, that's the figure that I think we're seeing on the ground as of today.
And at this time, if anybody else has questions for Zach, I'm okay with just letting folks ask questions instead of having them get up, sit down, get up, sit down. Just hop in.
I do have a question. Have you guys been working with tenants together? Because I know that they're the CBO here that does outreach in terms of tenant rights and maybe could be helpful in answering some of the questions as it relates to these tenants having to pay their rent as if they choose to exit and so forth. And so they may be the ones, and I don't know if you guys have been in contact with them.
Yes, that'd be great. Tenants Together has been around. I have spoken with their staff and have gotten some good answers. We're also working with Central California Legal Services. Chris McGinnis, who's their head housing attorney at this time on staff, is taking a real personal interest in this situation. The other, legal representation, I guess, that's been going on has been some private lawyers that have kind of come on site and apparently are trying to put together a class action suit at this time. But I will reach out to Tenants Together to see if we could get a firm answer on what do people do about rent. And right now what we're telling people is to withhold their rent. And that's based on just kind of offhanded comments from folks who think that's the answer at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Zach, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, I've had about a week and a half to formulate what I wish to say, and about a week and a half to decide where I stand on this issue. And so many times in politics, we're told that it's not personal. It's not personal. It's just business. It's not personal. And you really shouldn't form an attachment to the issue that you're advocating or advancing, or you shouldn't form an attachment to whatever it is you're trying to fight. Simply because you're in politics, you keep running into the same people, and it's important to keep good relationships, because in the interest of public policy, it's important to have a good relationship. This is one of those cases where it's not important for me to have a good relationship with the owner of the Somerset Apartments. This is one of those occasions where I feel very comfortable speaking freely about this situation, and I know that there are 500,000 plus people, men, women, and children, who are very interested to see what this organization does and to see if we are here to advance the interests of the people that we purport to represent. So in this case, this is personal for me, and I have a message for Mr. Chris Henry, slumlord. I have a message for Mr. Chris Henry. You have entered the city of Fresno at a time, at a special time, a very interesting time. And I know that you have an appointment to meet with our mayor this evening, and you have an appointment to meet with our city manager this evening. And just know that you're in your hotel room in the city of Fresno, and you're probably watching this online, or you're watching this on television right now. Just know that you've come to the city of Fresno at a very special time, because the city of Fresno is not going to tolerate any more slumlords. The city of Fresno moved last year to take a bite out of blight, and the city of Fresno is going to begin moving this very instant to take a bite out of you and others like you who come into our town to exploit this city's resources and exploit the people who live here. So Chris Henry, slumlord, we are coming for you, and we are coming for you today. You own a house in Santa Barbara, while your tenants in Fresno freeze. You bought the Somerset Apartments in 1999, and you have let them decay. You've let them fall apart while hundreds of your tenants suffer. You are responsible for hundreds of code violations, like termites, rodents, rotten wood, and this is all in addition to the situation with the gas that caused all of this. You have failed to recognize the gravity of this situation. You have failed to recognize the humanity involved here with 10 bedridden people, with people on dialysis. You have failed to recognize that are children who are not going to be ready to go to school because of the situations in their homes. You have hired legal counsel that has come before this body this morning to tell the city council and mayor that this is not your problem. Your legal counsel is audacious. He came before this body to say that this is the city's problem, not your problem. Well, Mr. Chris Henry, slumlord, your legal counsel has failed you, and this is your problem. But you have made it the community's problem. You have made it Firm's problem. You have made it this body's problem. You have made it our mayor's problem. And you have made it a problem for the entire city of Fresno, every man, woman, and child, because we have to clean up your mess, and we have to fix this in the name of humanity and in the name of decent housing, because that's what a municipal service corporation does. If Mr. Leifer's remarks are any indication of how you feel about the Somerset Apartments incident, you are not going to do anything. And that's what we do not need. Mr. Chris Henry, we need you to respond. We need you to respond with the full force of the organization that you represent, with every penny that you have to rectify the situation. But, again, judging from your council's response, I'm not optimistic. We have to act as a city, we have to act as a council, we have to act as a people to fix this problem and fix it permanently. And so it's for that, it's for those reasons that I'll be making a motion that we approve both resolutions this morning.
Councilmember Brand, were you the second? And Councilmember Olivier, just want to confirm that you want to add those corrections the city attorney recommended?
There's some language that city attorney has, and Mr. Henry, welcome to Fresno.
Okay, so we have a motion accepting both resolutions with the added corrections by the city attorney, and a second by Councilmember Brand. Councilmember Brand.
You know, let me start by saying that there's a lot of people, including the city manager, Councilman Olivier, Dale, and a lot of people in the city that came out and did a lot of work on their own time, a lot of other agencies, and a lot of private individuals and nonprofits that, you know, when all the bad things are said about Fresno, there's a lot of good people and a lot of good things that happen here that come together during times of crisis and provide humanitarian help. And it makes me feel proud to be part of this city when I know that there's that kind of effort out there in the community to respond to these kind of issues, these human issues. This issue here really embraces a lot of broader issues. And one would be the communications breakdown between the city, PG&E, Housing Authority, and some other agencies. Two, and something the city manager and I have talked about for 7 years, is the infrastructure crisis in the city of Fresno. Not just utilities and roads and underground improvements. We're talking about gas lines that, in this case, they're very, very expensive, maybe catastrophic, and the city has probably miles of gas lines that are 50-plus years old. So we don't want to end up with a major disaster like in San Bruno. So we need to start paying attention to our infrastructure. The response to an emergency that we've seen here, to me, this was, it wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't a tornado. Hopefully we'll never get those in Fresno, but, we get a major flooding here. You can see right now, I think the city managers learned a lot of lessons that we need to improve our game plan for the city on emergency preparation, and there may be things down the road, and I hope there is a lot of water, not to the point where it's causing disasters, but we need it. But we need to be prepared for those kind of emergencies. And really, this was a man-made disaster, and that's the other broader issue, is the broader issue of code enforcement that, since I've been here for 7 years, I've heard it, we've discussed it, we've had committees, we've made improvements. It's obvious that this exposed, the lack of resources we have at the city that we need to improve. The need to keep improving our policies, and I know there's going to be a second phase on our continued efforts to improve this, and again, this just reinforces that. But the conditions of basically the following things: a neglectful property owner, Asian immigrant tenants who don't complain and let bad things go on, an inattentive lender, and neglectful agency oversight has created the perfect storm of a human calamity, exposing the city, probably over 1,000 residents in this city, to third world living conditions. And that's what we have to deal with here in our job at the Fresno, to make sure this doesn't happen again. And again, this was a man-made, this wasn't a natural disaster. And as Councilman Olivier said, this owner's owned the property since 1999. And I say that because I'm in the business of property management and real estate. And when you bought a property in 1999, and by the time the great real estate boom of 2001 to about 2006, property values increased dramatically, rents increased dramatically. So if somebody came in, for example, and bought the property in 2005, 2006, they paid way too much money for it, they got a big mortgage. I can see maybe there was cash flow problems, but there really is absolutely no excuse in this case, because this property was bought at a time when they should have had a low loan-to-value ratio. There should be ample cash flow to cover all of the costs that were involved in running this property. There was simply no excuse at all to maintain the property properly. And essentially, the owner adopted a despicable business policy that I've seen, unfortunately, before in Fresno, where basically you take advantage of vulnerable Asian immigrants, Hispanic immigrants who don't complain, who don't say anything. They've got open roofs, they've got mold, no heating, no basic human conditions. And that model, we've got to find a solution at City of Fresno that we don't allow that to ever happen again. Finally, finding solutions. And I think what we're doing today, enacting the emergency ordinance, is a major tool that the city has. And I'm trying to think, City Attorney, I don't recall in my time I've ever seen it invoked.
I don't think it has, at least in the last 10 years.
Bruce, any? So the fact that we're doing this, I think, basically reinforces the extent of this human calamity and what we're doing today. The second thing is basically trying to triage this tenant population and to find ways to move to other units. And I've heard the gentleman said earlier, there's roughly, 500 families have moved out already, or 500 residents, is that correct? Can you come up for a second?
Yes, sir. As we've been going door to door for outreach and for distributing various needs, we found many of the units are no longer, people have left.
As you're relocating these tenants, these families are staying intact, correct?
Yes, most definitely. They're probably just moving in with a family member who either has, well, probably doesn't have a bigger place, but part of the cultural components here is, family is very important, and so they'll move them in.
Right. I don't know the exact number, but you probably don't know either, but there's somewhere between 1,000, 11, 12, 13, 1,400 people there. So we've got
yes, sir.
At least 30, 40, 50%. Okay. And you're continuing these same efforts too, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because what I'm thinking is that if you're successful in the next, 2 or 3 weeks, and all the other agencies involved in moving this population, to other units that are maintained properly, that provide decent human living conditions, and there's going to be a vacant complex or something close to that.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And so for us as a city, and this question, and these figures are up for debate as far as what it's going to cost. We know initially the city has as high as $370,000 just on the gas lines. I know there's questions of mold, there's questions of dry rot and electrical, plumbing, and a myriad of...
Lead and asbestos.
Okay. And pest control and so on and so forth, that somewhere along the line there could be $1 million potentially in code enforcement and just making this thing meet basic conditions of human occupancy, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Paula, if we do that, and that is the end result is that this complex has lost half its tenants or 3/4, the city needs to come in and rigidly enforce all of its code enforcement policies to basically hit the owner where it hurts the most, and that's the pocketbook, where you cannot reopen these units until these things are brought up to code into decent living conditions. I don't know any other motive to get the owner to finally take responsibility to do that. And this could serve as an example in the future. The third thing we need to do is engage the lender. There's a lender in this property, and I know the loans, the deed of trust, and the promissory note have conditions of maintenance and keeping the place looking and act in a safe and habitable manner. And normally lenders inspect on an annual basis. I'm not sure the lender's been out there. Okay. They have an interest too. They have a loan on this property that, in my opinion, based on what I've heard here, that could be at a financial risk right now based on the conditions. They need to engage and be involved with the city as a partner in trying to find a resolution. More importantly, potentially as a funding source to pay for these improvements, because we're going to consider, and correct me if I go too far, City Attorney, we can consider a receivership on this property?
That's correct.
And if a receiver gets involved, and there's basically who's going to pay for the receiver's cost, and that's something that, again, I think a lender needs to be actively engaged in, and maybe the lender should be the leading force. So I'm inviting the lender to come to the table and to get involved with us. And there's also the option of we can't force the owner to sell, but we can create conditions where hopefully the owner would sell to a willing buyer with the resources, experience to make this place a decent place to live in. But if we do that, one of the unintended consequences could be that a new owner may not take some of the same existing residents we have now. There may be too many people. I'm not sure. So that's something we need to think out as a council. And then again, this looking at the broader issue. This is just a microcosm in the city of Fresno and the county of Fresno. And I know these guys in the audience shaking their head know there are other issues like this out there that we need to, find solutions in this. We can't do it all ourselves. It's going to take the county, nonprofits, and many other housing authority and a lot of agencies to address this issue. So I'm sorry it came down to this human tragedy that brought us here together to look at all these tough questions we have. But I think it's actually good that we're trying to find and address these issues in a comprehensive way, so we don't have any future tragedies like this. And I gladly support the motion by Councilmember Olivier. Thank you.
Councilmember Capriolio.
Thank you, Council President. I want to add my appreciation and thanks to all of Fresno who have helped this emergency situation, and the firm leadership. Thank you and the mayor and city manager for being on site every day, all day, and making these adjustments to this really tragic situation. So again, thank you to everybody that stepped up and has done their part and will continue to do their part. And that's what Fresno, that's what our community does. And that's what Fresno is all about. And that's what we as a city council are going to continue to do. And these deplorable conditions will never, never be accepted in Fresno. I know Mr. Leifer, and he is a good advocate for his client. But to come before us and say, this is not a landlord problem, that's preposterous. That's a preposterous statement that you made to us. Totally unacceptable. First, these deplorable conditions are totally his responsibility, totally his problem. It wasn't created by anybody but negligence from the landlord, the property manager, the whole situation that he has brought upon Fresno and the tenants and citizens of Fresno. So this is incredible to me. So he must face reality, and that reality is to fix it, and to fix it now, right now. As a city, we also are going to engage in some long-term situations, some long-term remedies. And what that means is, again, as my colleague had indicated, the consulting with a lender, receivership are clearly viable options for us in this community. We need to address penalties, strong penalties, strong enforced penalties for anybody else, including the landlord, the slumlord in this case, strictly, firmly enforced. We need to develop a policy for the short-term strategic plan for what we're doing here and for Fresno itself. We are engaged in that process now, and we will continue to do so. Another aspect of that is our code committee that the mayor formed. We're going to get that going again, and we're going to address these particular issues and address them in a strong, strong fashion. And then again, a long-term strategy for an emergency like this. If those pipes would have blown up or something, what would we do as a city? So we're going to address a short-term strategy, a long-term strategy. We're going to get the community involved with this strategy, and this will not happen again in Fresno. Never again. Thank you.
Councilmember Soria.
Thank you, Council President. I too want to give thanks and appreciation to all the city staff, city manager, the mayor, my council colleague, for really stepping up and acting immediately on the city's behalf. I also want to thank the various partner agencies, the CBOs like FIRM, all the volunteers, and really the city of Fresno's community who really stepped up during this time of crisis. I want to also express how angry it makes me hear Mr. Henry's representative present himself and say that this is a city of Fresno's problem. I'm sorry, but it's not our problem. Mr. Henry's lack of action has made it our problem. And because it is a human issue, it is why we have decided to take immediate action. But we do have an expectation that Mr. Henry will act to fix all the problems, not only the gas problems, but all the problems related to substandard housing, because it is unacceptable that over 15 years he has let this property get to this really condition and expose some of our most vulnerable communities to the substandard housing. I feel like it's a crime. And I really believe that he needs to step up to the plate, and I'm glad that he's here this evening meeting with our administration to see a plan in moving forward and making sure that the issues get fixed. I really believe that it's unacceptable to have people in our community, some of the most vulnerable people in our community, immigrants, living without hot water for more than 2 weeks and living under these substandard housing conditions. Again, I do appreciate, I really want to say from the bottom of my heart, for all the work that the CBOs has done, the work that our city staff, the volunteers, but I really don't believe that this is ultimately the responsibility of these individuals. It should be Mr. Henry keeping up his end of the bargain, which is to provide livable housing for these community residents that are paying for the rent. And so it is his responsibility to maintain the property. And I know that on my watch, I will not tolerate any of these landlords to continue, absentee landlords to continue to prey on such vulnerable community members. I know that this issue is only one incident, but it's not an isolated incident. And so while I appreciate this resolution, and I will be supporting it today, and I appreciate also the mayor announcing that we will continue to move forward with our second phase of the code enforcement task force, I will call that that we look at considering immediately dedicating a couple of our code enforcement, working conjunctively with Fresno County. I've spoken to one of the supervisors, and they're interested in joining forces with us to address these health and safety issues that exist throughout our community. It is not only Somerset Village that is experiencing, that residents are experiencing substandard housing conditions, so that we need to take action now. And I would submit that we dedicate a few of our code enforcement officers to start chipping away at this issue that does exist in our community, and so that slumlords in our community know that we are no longer going to tolerate these conditions here in our community. So I do want to again thank everyone for the work that's being done. I would also submit that we need to consider looking at relocation as a strategy. We've heard it from firm's executive director and from some of the comments that many of those residents have already left, but I would submit that there are still 500 other family members, children that are housed there that potentially need our assistance to find them some livable place here in our community. So I would suggest that we consider that as part of our strategy as we move forward, and that we do come up with a timeline so these individuals that are living there know what to expect over the next few weeks, and that we can get them to a place that is safe and habitable for them. So I want to thank everyone again, and we'll be supporting this resolution.
City Attorney, I know you wanted to add the language to Councilmember Olivier's motion. Go right ahead.
The language we would recommend deleting is on the very end of the second resolution in numbered paragraph 3. Delete the phrase "at a cost not to exceed blank dollars."
Councilmember Olivier, I'm assuming you are okay. And the second is agreeable with that change. Councilmember Brand. Okay. Councilmember Quintero.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm in full agreement with every comment that's been made from the dais today. City Manager, what was the timeline for the repair work that's going to need to get done?
The timeline just to repair the underlying gas lines, underground gas lines, is 2 to 3 weeks. We are hopeful that Mr. Henry will also hire a contractor, either under the general contractor who's doing the gas line, to also make repairs to the 44 individual apartments that have leaking gas lines within the wall. He has told me that he has 2 crews ready to go immediately to address not only, I assume, those issues as well as the length of code violations that we have identified already. But we're being told, again, just to get the underlying gas lines repaired, that's 2 to 3 weeks, and then we have subsequent tests that we have to do to actually connect stoves and heaters back up because all of those have been disconnected as well, and we don't know, once we restore gas, how many of those units will pass and how many won't.
So realistically, those tenants aren't going to be able to move in 2 or 3 weeks.
It depends on the work. If there's additional work that's occurring concurrently, then it could be 3 weeks. If there's a decision by the property owner to do this work and then do the second work, then they could be longer than that. That's, again, why it's ever evolving. The next couple of days or the next 4 days will tell me, or I'll be able to report back to you how much work is occurring and if it's occurring all at the same time or if there are plans to do this over a longer period of time. If it's a longer period of time, then I very well may be coming back to you with a different strategy than what's been laid out today.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the administration as well for all the work that you've, and time that you've put in it, and Councilmember Olivier as well. Council, I'm going to make a comment, but I don't want it to be taken as a funny comment because I've seen on the news in other cities that something like this has occurred where the city's gone to court and they've made the owner of that property live in apartments like this until it's repaired. You know, and how would he like it if he had to live in conditions like that, and then he can that'll give him a full understanding of what his tenants have gone through. But I've seen in other cities where the court has ordered a landlord to actually live in those in apartments until it's been repaired. And I really think that, you know, that's something that we may even want to consider or have the attorney to look at, because I mean, there's just no excuse for this. There really isn't, and you know, Santa Barbara's a nice place, I can tell you that, and especially with the comments that Councilmember Brand said, there's no reason to let the condition of them go down like this. And I'm just wondering how many times Mr. Henry has come to town to look at his apartments, other than just collecting the rent or having a manager collect the rent. But I just wonder how he would like to live there. And he's not here today. You know, I think that's just not right. If he's in town, he should be here and listen to what we have to say as a council as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Quintero. Those are all the council comments I have, and as typical as we do it, I usually am the last to make the remarks normally, unless someone else wants to speak. But I want to start by calling my friend and colleague up, Councilmember Zhang, if you don't mind. He may not be prepared for this, but just bear with me. Only because I have several questions I want to ask, but I really would like to get your impression. I've heard from Zach on the relocation issue. Obviously, we have a number of residents that are questioning that and desiring some form of that. We've had intensive discussion, Councilmember, about whether or not this is the most appropriate strategy with keeping families together, and obviously there are major cultural issues. Do you have any perspective on that you can offer us?
Well, I'll give you my perspective. I don't know if it's going to add value, but let's see. You know, as Firm has stated, there are those that have moved or can move, has already moved, but family to a certain point still are intact. It's just that there's an added burden to those that are taking the families in. So, you know, especially during the holidays as well. For the Southeast Asian community, for the Hmong community, this is one of our most busiest time in terms of relatives coming from all over the country to the world. And so now you've added additional family members into that pot. So that's interesting, unique challenges that the community is going to face into the holidays as we go through. But, you know, when I stated earlier that because the city, the electeds and those that represent the city is perceived from the community as official, and word coming from the dais is a little bit different than words coming from community organizations. especially when it comes to these type of activities. And when we're talking about relocation, we're going to have a lot of different organizations, different perspective, saying move here, do this, and different things. But I think to help, if that is the move or the emergency states it, then the message, especially that message, should come from the city's perspective, that we're going to be moving it. And I think it will ease some of the concerns and uncertainty from the community, right? From who's listening to, who's doing what, and how's doing what. Because we've already seen that community are already being taken advantage of in terms of this crisis. You have different entities, individuals, and I love our attorneys. Please don't get me wrong, but they're already reaching out to individuals that don't understand the larger ramification of what's going on and signing them up for class action and those things. That's really what I'm concerned about as a community now. Is the community being taken advantage for a larger perspective. And it's going to be hard for the CBOs and those that are doing good work to try to corral the message and to say, that they're doing this work, and we're trying to wait to have a better perspective. We're talking to all these folks to make sure that you're getting the right type of advice that's in the best interest, right? When you have different folks coming in to begin to having these dialogue for their own specific interests. And that's why the city is such a key role in trying to be kind of the official message. And as I stated earlier, what the city says, it helps the CBOs to support the message and to make sure that the community is together, even though there's different Southeast Asian languages together, but to also be able to move in a direction that the city wants it to move, if that is the direction to say that we want to be able to relocate because that's the best thing. Then you ease a lot of concern, ease a lot of fear that the community may be going through, and then we would be able to organize much better, especially with the work of the CBOs and then the different agencies that are putting a lot of effort into this.
Thanks, Council Member. Appreciate it.
Is that it?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Zach, if I could ask you down one more time, too, I want to kind of drill down into this and a couple specifics. You mentioned that about 500 people had already just voluntarily left. Now, I know we have 41 units that have gas leaks going inside of them. Do you know if those families are the ones that have relocated, or are these other families?
I do not. That would take some evaluation, but
okay,
we could probably figure that out.
Okay. I'd like to know that. My perspective is obviously those folks that have, no heat, no hot water, no heat in that house is really the highest priority in this particular instance for me. If there's a way for you to report back to us on kind of the status of those families first, I'd be curious to see that. And then the other question I have is the families that have relocated, obviously by and large, they're relocating with other family members?
Yes.
So I'm assuming. Right, okay. And I'm just assuming that this is placing an extra burden. Councilmember Zhang touched on it a moment ago, an extra burden on another family. Do we know how they're dealing with those resources as far as, additional food, additional utility charges, water, heat? Do we have any idea if there's any offset for their costs with that?
No.
Okay.
No. But we would assume, as I've said numerous times also in the media, this is one of the most resilient, toughest communities that I've ever worked with in my career. Yeah. And these folks figure things out. And when it comes to family, they especially figure things out. But just as Blong has mentioned here, we're coming up into busy season for this community with the Hmong New Year coming up here real quick. And so, he makes a great point. This is a significant challenge for the community.
Right.
Also, I think it's important to note that a lot of the folks who are still there would be probably a lot of elderly folks or families that have an elderly parent in the home with them. So harder families to move, harder families to care for, harder families to fit into a different family member situation, and I think that's what what we're seeing. Now, a lot of this is assumption. A lot of this is based upon the numbers that we basically are assessing 2 times per day, trying to figure out who is still here. Are they coming back? That was something brought up at one of our internal meetings. Did a lot of folks go for the Thanksgiving weekend?
And then come back.
And then are they going to come back? And so are we going to find, today all of a sudden there's 700 people? We're not sure, but we're assessing each day to try to get the best numbers.
Well, I want to join with my colleagues in thanking you, you and your group's efforts, and along with the multitude of other organizations that have stepped up to the plate to assist in dealing with this emergency. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Let me ask, and Bruce, I don't know if it's going to be for you or potentially Dell, but when we have, as we're kind of finding out that a lot of the residents are kind of voluntarily moving out and they're leaving behind those units, are we then going in as staff or code enforcement and assessing those units to see how are we handling with kind of the overall evaluation of code enforcement?
Well, again, this is the first time I've heard this. So this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we have another incident command meeting where we'll take this data. We did go through and evaluate a percentage of those apartments, so we'll need to reconcile those against work we've already done. If they are indeed vacant and they are apartments that we have not, then we will work with the property manager to gain access to do those inspections. Del, how many do you think we still have left to do?
Council President, council members, we have done 180. We have about 40 left to go. This morning, we were making contact with Jerry, the property manager, to set up an inspection of those 40 that we haven't done. It should be completed by Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's great. Thank you, Dell. And in light of that, that leads me to the next thing I wanted to say was thank you to just the overwhelming response from the city and the staff. Bruce, I saw all of your emails this weekend, and Del, I know your shop, and Jennifer, I know the work that you all have been doing around the clock on this as you have become aware of this. So thank you all for that work, and we obviously are going to be looking forward to that report on Wednesday or Thursday, so we can kind of really get our arms around what we're really dealing with. I think to some degree we're not even quite sure yet the extent of what we're all dealing with. We know we have some major issues right now, but we may find out that there are more issues left to consider. So I want to make a couple of comments, and then I'm going to make a couple of recommendations, and everything that I could have said really has been said, and in some instances has been said better by my colleagues even than I can say it. And I would join with Councilmember Olivier in his very strong remarks towards the property owner. This is a travesty of justice, and I would join with you, Councilmember Olivier, in that sentiment. And obviously, I think you're going to have the full support of this body to do whatever we need to do with this complex in your district. These are all Fresnans. I, like Councilmembers Capriolio and Soria, expressed outrage, and I think Councilmember Capriolio, you called the remarks of Mr. Leifer preposterous, and I would even go a step further and say they're quite offensive at this moment for those to be the public response of the property owner. Is quite offensive to not only us here and I think our staff that are working around the clock, but also to the residents that deserve a better response than that. And I certainly hope that things that were said here today would motivate the owner to be more cooperative with the efforts that are going on by this entire city to help fix a problem at his complex. So I would certainly hope there's a different tone that we can expect in just a few hours. If not, we're prepared to deal with that too. So rest assured that I think that in a very strong way that this body right here that will be making very tough decisions is fully prepared to make sure that this property owner realizes the full weight of the city, and we will bring it to bear if we need to, if we can't get the type of cooperation that we're looking for our residents. Make no mistake about that. So Again, I appreciate the resilience of our Southeast Asian community. Listen, we are talking about an amazing group of people, treasures of our community that have been forced to live in, unconscionable circumstances by our standards as Americans here. So for that, I apologize. I apologize to the residents of that complex that have had to endure that with not feeling that they had true advocates that they could come to and rectify this situation. I hope that this never happens again. And I hope that there's no resident that feels as though they have to live in deplorable, detestable, unconscionable conditions and will not report that. We need to make sure that we are responsive, and we need to make sure that our decisions are deliberate and swift and with the utmost integrity for our residents. And I think we're going to do that. And I think this is the first step in addressing the larger issue of slumlords that we have in our community. We're going to put a sign up, we need to, that says slumlords not welcome in Fresno. And we need to make sure that we enforce that and stand behind that. Finally, I want to make, again, my comments don't need to be too long because I think that we've covered the full gamut, but I wanted to make sure that I had a couple of more recommendations for staff to bring back to us this week that may or may not have been mentioned. Bruce, I want to make sure that, on Thursday, I think we're going to probably discuss this again on Thursday, maybe in closed session. Obviously, we have some reporting to do from the property owner in that meeting. We're going to want to hear the outcome of that. But I also want to make sure that we are pursuing, which I think is a very strong strategic maneuver, and that's contacting the lender. And I'd like to know by Thursday, what that looks like. Councilmember Brandon, I think Capriolio as well, Soria, all mentioned the very same thing of us making sure that we contact the lender. There are habitability covenants that I am sure that this property owner has to meet with the lending documents. We need to know what those are, and I think the lender needs to know what those are too. And I'd like to, in light of what we all learned today, I know that we were kind of discussing whether or not relocation is the right approach or not right or wrong approach. I think that maybe just a further evaluation of that with groups like FIRM and whatnot is appropriate at this point, given what we've heard a moment ago. And maybe some further recommendations can be brought to us in the next couple of days on actions we can take to support the work that they're doing. If nothing else, we've got to figure out a way to help these family members that are taking in new people that are probably overburdened and overloaded with all sorts of issues. I can only imagine. It's heartbreaking to think about, but we need to be making sure we're doing everything we can to at least assist those folks that have made that voluntary choice. Assist those families, and I think there are ways that we can do that. And obviously, I'd like to expand the relocation effort as cast as wide as net as we can. That makes sense. And then I'd also like to see kind of an updated timeline for the repairs. You mentioned it already, but I know that we're optimistic. We're 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We've been around this building long enough to know that, that's probably pretty optimistic. So I think what I'd be looking for a little bit later this week is probably, some best case scenario, worst case scenario, where we can see kind of, what this looks like on both ends. And I think that's a fair approach for the residents as well as us in order to make the right decisions going forward, to kind of give us, hey, this is, if everything went right in a perfect world, this is where we'd be. But listen, if some things start going wrong, if some left turns start happening, we need to be prepared for this. So I'm hoping that we can, I'd like to add that direction to the council members' motion and to just bring that back to us for further evaluation on Thursday. I think that would certainly be fair at this point. So with that, those conclude my remarks, and I have Councilmember Olivier that'd like to make some more.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to thank you all.
All right, you're very welcome, Councilmember. All right, with that, we have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, item passes 6-0 with Councilmember Brandow absent. Thank you all.